Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today's topic is a look at the future of law and what we can think about the future of law, looking back at things and changes that have occurred in the tax accounting industry. I'm your host, Dean Sonderegger. I'm here today from Wolters Kluwer. Wolters Kluwer is a global provider of content and information services to the legal markets. I have spent the previous 13 years before this role working in the tax software industry. So that's where my angle from this comes. I had a personal experience watching the transformation occur in the tax industry, and we're starting to see the same kind of industry changes occur in the legal industry. When we look at the impact of technology on the law, there's a debate that goes back and forth. And really, when you're looking at the work that attorneys do, the debate goes along the lines of, is the work of an attorney something that's a repeatable, predictable process that a robot could do, and you could train a robot to do, or is it a work of art, a unique creation done differently each time the attorney engages? And really, the answer to that question drives a little bit of what you think that the impact of technology will be. Obviously, the more predictable and repeatable, the more technology could, in theory, supplant attorneys. If you look at predictions from a variety of different people, you get a variety of different predictions, some dire, some less so. You know, one prediction here we have, it says that 2/3 of attorneys won't be practicing law in 15 years. Or on the other hand, different prediction comes down and says there's just going to be a slight decrease each year in the demand for lawyers' hours. So let's take a look at that and see what we can learn from the tax market that might inform us in the legal market. But as we start to get through that, I think it's useful to take a look quickly at what the value story is for an attorney, because that really sets the stage for what the impact of technology would be. So when we look at hiring an attorney or a professional, any type of professional for that matter, there's really two fundamental things that the attorney is hired for. First of all, is they have specialized knowledge that only that professional has. And if you think about the law, there's a lot of training that goes into the knowledge that an attorney has to interact with the law, which can be cumbersome and confusing at times. And then the second thing that occurs is, in certain circumstances, we need representation. And from a legal standpoint, we need representation in court. And so these are things only a professional can provide. And there is actually an exclusivity built into the system here of the professional practice on two fronts. One is that you have rigorous educational requirements. You got to go through law school, potentially go through and get an LLM after law school. And the second being, you have to be licensed. And for in the legal market, you have to pass the bar. And that's a licensing system that's managed by the profession itself. So how is it that technology really changes that? I think it's in three fundamental ways. Enabling technology, first of all, can democratize access to that knowledge. So if you have a good software or information system, that can make the law much more interpretable for the layperson. So you become a member of the club, if you will. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that enabling technology can take simple tasks, say drafting of a lease, and make that layperson effective and efficient in the development of that task or the pursuit of that task. And the third impact that you see to professions typically is that a good set of technology can take a complicated task, one that's typically done by a professional, and dramatically reduce the time that's required to perform that complex task. So those are the three ways that you really see an impact of technology into any profession, and in particular, what could happen in the legal profession. So let's pivot a little bit in the conversation, and let's talk about what happened in the tax market over the last decade or so. So the most significant impact that we all recognize and see is the introduction and adoption of the market of retail tax technology or consumer tax technology. These are tax prep software packages, and we see them advertised on television, and if you go to the store, you see them available at Costco and other places like that. So if you look over the last decade or so, you've seen a 6% annual growth year over year in e-filings from these packages. And if you go back to 2016, the last tax year on record, about 52 million people filed individual tax returns, e-filed them using this kind of software. Now that's pretty significant because what's happening there is that you're seeing 52 million people get access to professional tax advice without actually going to see an accountant. And that's a significant shift in the market. on top of that, the lines between a traditional software provider and a service provider are being blurred too. So if you look at these popular tax prep packages, a lot of them include advice service, where I can call an 800 number and get in touch with an accountant, and I can pay an extra fee, kind of an insurance, if you will. So if I get audited, I'm going to be represented by an accountant. So not only do I get access to tax advice without having to engage an accountant, if I do need to engage the accountant, it's done to me in a very, I can do it in a very cost-effective fashion. And so the next question that you get into with that is, well, if that's the case, are accountants going the way of the buggy whip? Are they no longer around because there's no demand for them? And this is where it gets very interesting. If you look at the number of tax returns prepared by tax professionals over the last decade, that's relatively flat. There's about 80 million returns that are created, and over the last decade, that has been about the same. However, what has happened is that the number of firms that are providing those services have dropped on average about 6% per year, roughly the same rate at which you've seen the increase in the personal use. So what's happening there is that you see the same demand from the market, but there's efficiency being driven from the tax prep software, which is also used by businesses, so that the number of people required, the number of accountants engaged in these services is dropping. The other thing that you see is because the consumer tax prep software is very inexpensive, the fees for that tax prep work by professionals are effectively flat over the last decade compared to inflation. So there is no increase in fees for those things, and there's significant price pressure because as a consumer, I can always go and do it myself instead of going to the professional. So again, you have actually over the period of time, many more people getting professional tax advice than that had before, but the demand for the preparers themselves staying about the same. So the next logical jump one could say is, well, is that just a retail market thing, consumer tax market? What about the impact in the professional tax market, the corporate tax market? And so if you compare two time periods, in 2003, the top 10 accounting firms had about 34% of their revenues attributable to the tax business. Fast forward to 2016, the top 10 accounting firms had only a quarter of their business, 25%. So a shift from 34% to 25% of their revenue is attributable to tax business. Well, why is that? Well, a couple different things. On one hand, you've seen a development of corporate tax preparation software, which has mirrored consumer tax preparation software. This has enabled corporations to do their own tax returns. So you've seen this wave of insourcing where corporate tax departments grow and they do more work in-house. And then the second thing that has occurred is you've had a very active regulatory environment. And so companies have an incentive to have more in control and visibility into key matters and tax matters. So those two things have really driven the business further over to the corporate tax market, and so to the corporations, and the accounting firms are having a smaller piece of that tax prep market. So what can we learn from this, and what are the implications or predictions for the legal market? Well, to start off with, I think you're going to see an ongoing expansion of what we already see a couple of very robust offerings of expert tools that are aimed at the consumer legal market. So you have a number of tools that allow people to go up and draft basic contracts, get basic legal advice through the services. And what that's going to happen is very similar to the consumer tax prep market. You're going to see many, many more people having access to the law at a much more affordable price. And I think in parallel with the consumer tax market, you will see that there's still going to be about the same demand for legal services. You're still going to have people going to attorneys for family law and other matters, but you're going to see fewer providers providing meeting the same demand, and you're going to see price pressure on that. So that's prediction number one. Prediction number two is very similar to the insourcing of the corporate tax department. you're going to see an expansion of corporate counsel. So we see this happening already, right? You see that corporate counsel spend is increasing 3 to 5% per year, whereas their spend on outside counsel is flat. We think that's going to continue because you're going to see increased availability of tools and providers that make that in-house work much more cost effective. And, very similar to the tax market, there is a very robust regulatory environment. So I think that the environmental threats that companies face these days have real financial impacts and penalties, and in-house counsel has to be experts on and directly in control of more matters. I mean, cybersecurity is a great example of that, is a environmental threat that the company needs to take very seriously and be on top of. And then finally, the third prediction that we've got is that corporate law as practiced within law firms is going to continue to transform. Again, we already see this in areas of e-discovery, contract review. You're going to see expert systems added into the workflow of attorneys in law firms that automate repeatable activities. And then when you talk about the things that truly are more artisan type of work, where it is a unique creation each time there's an engagement, what you're going to see is artificial, or what we like to say, augmented intelligence systems that help attorneys in that work. So they're not doing the work for the attorneys. What they're doing is they're doing things for the attorneys to help them in their job. And these are things that we talk about in terms of machine learning and natural language processing. Can I go through large sets of unstructured content and pull insights out of that? And analytics, document analytics. What are we seeing in trends on contracts here? Predictive analytics based on past performance. What do we think the likely next step is? What do we think the likely outcome is? And how should we change our strategy in negotiation or in litigation as a result of that? What's the impact of that going to be? I think initially what you're going to see is you're going to see law firms will have the same services, will be providing services for the same fees, but what they will be providing is a whole heck of a lot more services for that same fee. So customers are going to get a better deal. Over time, what you will see from a competitive standpoint is there's going to be pressure on the fees themselves as those fees get pushed down. So that's our presentation for today. Thank you very much for your time. If you're interested in more information, please reach out to us. We would love to talk to you, and have a great day. Thank you very much.